Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today to discuss how agencies can use analytics to drive more revenue. My name is Chris. I'm one of the customer success managers here at JobAdder. Today is sure to be another informative session and some great takeaways from our panelists. I'm excited to say that we are joined today by Adele Last and Kerry O'Connor. Adele is in her 28th year in the recruitment sector. She has run recruitment businesses across all sectors, and today is the director of Career Lasso, which is a recruitment training and consulting business. As well, she is a podcaster for Recruitment News Australia and an organizer of Captain's Table recruitment networking events. Kerry has 24 years of recruitment experience, beginning her career at Morgan & Banks and running her own business since 2005. Her business specializes in B2B sales and marketing roles. Her passion is career curation, obtaining repeat business, and teaching and coaching recruiters. How are you both going today?
Fabulous.
Good, thanks, Chris. Thanks for having us.
Really great.
Thanks for joining. All right, before we kick off, I wanted to let you all know that we will open up for a Q&A, so you can ask your questions directly to our experts. Throughout the session, you can submit your questions using the questions tab, which we will answer towards the end. The session will also be recorded in case you miss anything and want to come back to it later. All right, let's get stuck in. Now, we know that the current recruitment scene is changing all the time. So you have to stay flexible to keep your agency competitive. We also know that your ATS and your CRM hold important information, but the common challenges that agency leaders are seeing is, how do we turn that into a plan? I want to kick off this discussion with our recent JobAdder customer research, particularly one question from the survey that asked agency managers and owners, which area are they reporting on most? So here's the results on the screen that you can see here. What we want to know is, does this ring true to what you're both seeing in the industry? I think Adele, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, sure. I think it does ring true to what I'm seeing in the industry. Makes sense that placements would be so high. I think it's one of those driving factors for all recruitment agencies. We want to see placements that are made. We want to see how that compares. So knowing in a survey response that that's kind of the most reported on or most, looked at report doesn't surprise me in that sense. I think data has become far more valuable as the market becomes changeable. The market has gone through significant change in a really short period of time. And I think people are starting to rely more on the analytics and the data to tell them the story that they need to see rather than looking at gut feel or what they see in their own business or, conversations that they're having. I think people are starting to move towards looking at the data. And I think that's a good thing. It's a good way to correct that balance between just going on your gut feel or what you see or feel in your own business.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that placements is your reason for being in recruitment. If you're not making placements and you've got the placement dance and that kind of thing, or the music's playing or the bell ringing, what are we here for? So that's the prime reason for being. Placements is good, but it's also a lag indicator. So the job's already done, and the reason you're looking at it because that equals revenue. So placements equals revenue. You do a good job, you make the placement, you invoice it. So that's important for, what's the revenue like and what's the money coming in. But it's a lag indicator because the job's already done. So I would be placing more attention on fill rates, interviews, what's coming. So lead indicators that are going to tell us what's happening next. There's nothing there that says business development, client visits, client phone calls, relationship phone calls, BD activity. And that translates into future revenue. So I would be spending some time on those lead indicators that tell you what's happening in the future rather than what's already been and done. We already kind of know that. This is just confirming what we already know. But revenue in the future, that is really important. And in a market that's kind of a bit topsy-turvy and a bit up and down, those lead indicators and what's coming is going to be even more important, because if there's a dip in activity in those, that that has huge consequences for next quarter and the quarter after that.
Yeah, some really solid points there, and it just rings true that you have to stay flexible in this market. BD activity is crucial. All right, let's move through to the next one here. So, what are the 3 most crucial metrics that agencies should track, and then how can they improve on them? Adele, I think we'll kick off with you again.
Yeah, there's 3 really key ones that I talk to my clients about often as really obvious things to keep an eye on at a high level within your business, and even recruiters can watch this as well. Time to fill is the first one. So looking at how long is it taking us to fill a job from the time we're taking the brief from a client till the time we've got a temp in the role or we've got an offer on the table and accepted. How long is that taking us? That's an important factor because obviously it impacts so many parts of the way we do the recruitment process, and whether, you know, what the market is doing and telling us, and sourcing difficulties and all sorts of things. So the time to fill is a really good one. The other one is client visits. Kerry touched on that as being, you know, a lead indicator. I agree with that as well. The metrics that I like to watch around client visits obviously are how many new client visits, how many existing client visits, how many conversions are we having, you know, how many ongoing conversations are we having with clients. But visiting clients, and I'm talking about in person, old school, in person, face-to-face client visits, the ones that count. Yes, you can have a phone call with somebody. Yes, you can have a video chat as a preliminary conversation, or in circumstances, you know, where geographically you can't be in the room with the person. But, you know, I'm still seeing recruiters who are doing video calls with clients that are in the same city as them, you know, a couple of suburbs away. So it has to be in person there. And the final metric I tell people to look out for is the fill ratio or fill rate. And this is about, of the jobs that we've got on, how many are we filling? Are we filling a high proportion? Because we do a lot of work. Think about that. We do a lot of work in the BD process, in the branding process, to get clients attracted to us, to convert that into a job order, to get a job order on board, and then we don't fill it. It's a wasted opportunity. Or on the flip side, was it unfillable? So the other thing I want to note about the fill rate or ratio is fillability. So as a business owner or leader out there, if you're not measuring jobs by fillability, then you're missing a key indicator there as well, because not all jobs are equal, not all clients are equal. So you need to make sure that the jobs that you're bringing in have a high fillability rating. They are ones that you are able to fill, and therefore your time to fill will be at a reasonable level, and you know, hopefully be able to get repeat business from that as well. So they're the 3 ones I'm always talking to clients about, and fillability is really key.
100% on the fillability, because it's the opportunity cost of chasing your tail on a job that's wasting your time. You could have spent that time on a job that was good and easy to fill and in your wheelhouse, and you're chasing your tail over here instead of filling the job you should be filling and getting that in, because the time to fill is quicker, you've got a good relationship with your client, or it's a new client that has potentially more business. So be very careful. There's, you know, having reams and reams of lots of jobs, and it's so easy for a recruiter just to say yes, yes, yes every time a job comes in. That is the natural inclination. And I've got to say, my business was transformed by being very clear on what we say yes to and what we say no to. And we have had massive increases in sales and year-on-year sales because we're sticking to our knitting, and we've got tight relationships with some clients and some skin in the game. So fill ratios often help if it's retained, because you know your client's got some skin in the game as well. So more retained work, sticking to your wheelhouse, you're absolutely spot on. The other thing I would say in terms of that is the efficiencies of the team on when you start, you do lots more interviews because you've got to get your head around your marketplace, who's who in the zoo, what's the scandal in the industry, what's happening, who's buying who's doing what, you know, who's moving, who's got a good reputation, who doesn't. So lots of interviews and speaking to clients and potential clients gives you that market information that you can then utilize to become an expert in that space. So you spend more time doing interviews because you're trying to figure out how your market is. You're spending more time doing more client visits. You're spending more time getting it right between what's the right candidate, what's best in class, what are the benchmarks, and therefore the people you're sending to your client then get interviewed. So as you get better, you do less screening because you can read on paper who's good and who's not better. The screening you do is more efficient, so that you've got a better idea of who's worth spending an hour to an hour plus with having a proper interview with, whether it's face-to-face or Zoom. Then you've got a better idea of what your client wants, so you're not wasting their time. There's nothing better than sending candidates that don't waste the client's time and they turn around and say, I could have hired either of those two candidates, they can both do the job, you're making my job easier. So you get better at understanding your client and their needs, and you're making more placements. So when you start, there's lots more activity, but as time goes on and you get better at it, you spend less time screening, less time in interviews, and getting better bang for your time and effort in terms of the people you're putting in front of clients and them actually hiring them. So then we're looking at the efficiency. So before, when I first started 20 years ago, there was lots of activity. Now I can interview one candidate, stick them in front of the client, and they go, there you go, placement made. And I've got a lot of clients that I do that with, because you get to understand your client, and therefore you understand what they want, you understand those benchmarks, and they love you for it. So that improvement in efficiency over time helps massively. So I would look at the ratios for how many interviews to how many interviews we get with the client versus how many placements we're making. So that's the metric in terms of improving your efficiency, not just straight activity, but the efficiency of those activities. More efficient, more placements.
Absolutely. Some, really good responses and, notes I've taken out of that already. And, a lot of what you're both saying is ringing true to the discussions I'm having with our job adder clients on a daily basis. One thing I wanted to touch on, we were discussing earlier in the week that COVID was actually, it started sort of 4 years ago now. So there's a lot of new recruiters in the industry that aren't used to actual in-person client visits. Another awesome point that you both raised around, the fillability rating, which I don't think a lot of agencies are really thinking and talking about. Some are, some maybe not. The ratios piece is awesome. We really need to know, how many actions it takes at each part of the process to equal a placement. Also, a notable mention as well, the time it takes to move through each stage. So that efficiency piece is absolute key. Moving on to the next one, the question we have here is around, what steps to take once you've identified trends and patterns. Two key initial thoughts from me before we kick on this one. One would be consultant optimization. So identifying areas of improvement, from screening time all the way through to offer acceptance rate. Number two would be around business operations. So being able to identify opportunities for efficiency. That could be the number of interviews or phone calls on a weekly basis per consultant, or even, admin tasks like responding to those unsuccessful applicants, which in a lot of cases could be done a lot quicker. So coming back to the original question for you both, what steps should we take once we've identified these trends and patterns? Adele, we'll kick off with you again.
Yeah, and I think we've touched on this a little bit around data can often be retrospective. It's telling us the story that has been and not the future. And that's where we have to be really careful on being over analytical in some cases with the data. But it's important to look at what has happened, the history of what's happened or how you've been working, will help you predict better for the future. Now, that's whether you're a recruiter trying to work out how to be more efficient with your placement times and your placement processes, or whether that's an owner trying to work out whether they've got the right people in the right roles, or whether they have got the right mix of clients and jobs on as well. So I think it's just about using the data to be more future focused. So what does the story tell us previously, but how can we use that to forecast what might happen in future? How can we focus on the areas that we need further training in? How can we focus on the areas where we need to, as Kerry said, perhaps say no? Perhaps we're seeing a lot of jobs on the board with a low fillability rating. So what is that data telling us? You need to analyze that with the external information, those other metrics we've talked about. You need to have a look at if there are other external factors. We all know sometimes we do take on a low fillability rating role, but we have a reason for that. Perhaps it's a favor, perhaps it's going to lead us into other business. So you have to look at those external factors, but I'd really like to see people getting much more future focused with their data analysis rather than just dwelling on what's been and making decisions from the past. What does it tell you about what we can do for the future, and where do we need to spend our time and energy? As a trainer, obviously I'd like to say make sure you're closing those skills gaps. Where are where are you weak? As Kerry mentioned about the ratios, I call them conversions, same thing. If you're referring lots of candidates to a client and you're not getting interviews, the client's not interviewing, then your referral to interview ratio or conversion is low. Why? How are you referring the candidate? What information are you providing? Have you built trust with the client that they are taking your advice? Are you influencing there? So it's looking at each one of those indicators and then picking it apart and then making a future plan for how you're going to address that.
Funnily enough, one of the things that we utilised, because one of the guys on our team is an ex-HR director, and he was putting his HR hat on saying, what would I want from my recruiter or my internal talent team? And we looked at the candidate experience. We often focus on clients because they're the ones that pay our bills, but candidates become future clients too. And we looked at how long is somebody sitting there before they are told thanks but no thanks and get the Dear John email. And we noticed, and he noticed, he said, some of this is far too long. We should have a target date for within a certain amount of period of time that they've gotten back to. So say worst case scenario, 7 days. So you've got enough time to get through. Some people have a day, some people have a couple of hours, depending on the size and shape of what's going on in your business and the competitive nature of it. But we instituted a target date for if somebody applies, they should hear back from us, yes or no, within X period of time. And we check it every week. And as a result of that, we've got better candidate experience, because even if it's a no, they want to hear no. And the amount of, one of my pet hates is looking at jobs on Seek and it says only shortlisted candidates will be contacted. Well, what's the point of having an ATS if you're not using it? It is so easy to give them some kind of information back, whether it's an SMS or an email, letting them know that they're not right for the job. So we went and instituted a time frame, but that came straight from the data. We're not doing as well as we think we should on this. Most of us are going well, but there's ones that lag and we need to get onto it. So we check it every week, and we've improved that markedly from when we started checking the data to today. So there's certainly impact there after a pattern that could be improved and putting a target on it. The other thing that we did, that I focus on, is replicating the DNA of the most successful consultants you've got. What do their activities look like? And then how do we replicate that? Replicate what works. Clone the people that are doing a great job for you and billing really well. There's often some minute little changes. So it's not just the activity, which the data tells us, but then it's also chatting to the consultant, and it's how they do that activity, the quality of the activity, because anybody can make 100 calls for the sake of making 100 calls, but sometimes the quality people make 10 quality calls and get a better result than somebody's who's made 100. So it's having a look at, what does best practice look like? Who are the best performers? What are they doing? And then teach them. Get them to teach everybody else in your team, this is what I do, this is how they do it. I've never seen in so many instances, and I recruit salespeople for a living, if they're not the best performing rep, they always know who the best performer is, But do you ever ask and sit down for a coffee and say, tell me what you do and how you do it? Can I shadow you for a day or two to understand, what you're doing differently? And oftentimes it's some minute changes, but those small changes, massive return on investment. So I would use those patterns of the top performers and replicate it, find ways to replicate it through your team.
Yeah, absolutely. And through consultant activity reporting, that's how we find that information. That's how we find who's using the system the best, who's actually doing every step in the process. Usually they're the ones that correlate to the most placements, right? And also I liked what you were talking about, the candidate experience. It's extremely crucial. The reason you have a ATS or a CRM, that's an asset of your business, right? The candidates that are in your database, you have to have a good relationship for them, or the quality of your database, it isn't as good as it could be. And I'd like to add as well to any job adder customers that are on the call today, I'd highly suggest, go into the reports tab. Look into the source of your applicants, time to fill jobs. Are you creating any custom reports based on consultant activity, which you can do via the notes section? On top of that, we also do have an analytics platform which has, new and improved features with the ability to completely customize reports and dashboards, which is an absolute game changer. All right, we're on to the Q&A section. So let's move to, we've got a question here from Amanda. What data should agencies be sharing with clients to improve their revenue?
Oh, look, I think a lot of the stuff we've talked about in terms of fill rates and time to fill, there's lots of metrics that you can use, but oftentimes ways to improve revenue is if you've got some really great metrics, why can't you promote that and toot your own horn a bit? You'll often see on recruiters' websites now, they'll say how many candidates they've got in the database, how many jobs they've filled, how many repeat business clients, how many candidates, stay in their job more than a year or two or whatever it is. So go and have a hunt around for those kind of metrics. And if there's some good ones, toot your own horn, put it in your social media, stick it on your website. If there's some things that you're doing well, tell people about it.
Yeah, I think another way that people could use data to help their business is around tender submissions and bids and award applications. I was lucky enough to be a judge for the RCSA Awards last year, and it was interesting to me how many submissions lacked data. They lacked that there were lots of great words and lots of information of how they're wanting to tell me how they've demonstrated a particular competency or category, but there was not a lot of data in some cases. So I think we could use that data, just like Kerry said, around promoting yourself. What are the things you do really well? And, putting it on things like bids and submissions and ways to help kind of prove that you're able to demonstrate that skill. The data speaks very loudly, much more loudly than anything else, in fact.
All right, another question we have here is from John. As I'm keeping tabs on this data, whether it's weekly, monthly, or quarterly, what's a reasonable time frame to implement change internally based on the data we're seeing? And this is a really important one because I have this discussion with my clients all the time. It's great that we have reports, we can pull these reports, but what are we doing, and what sort of time frame do we take action on this?
Oh, look, a wise person once said, what gets measured gets done. So that's why there's KPIs on every decent job description on a job that you're filling and also on your own job. So, sometimes you want to focus on one or two key metrics because that's going to be a driver, or there's a problem that needs solving. For example, we thought we took too long to get back to candidates. So we said, all right, we're going to put some hard and fast metrics and a target on it, and we're going to measure it weekly. So the more often you measure, the more opportunities you have to course correct. So if you, like most people get their, if you're a business owner, you'll get your reports with the accountant once a year, and you have a look and go, how much money did I make? Fantastic. And then, but you only have a look at it once a year, and you either celebrate or commiserate with a glass of wine and then move on and forget about it. But if you measure quarterly, and oftentimes in recruitment, we're often measuring quarter to quarter, you have 4 times to course correct and change. If you do it monthly, then you've got 12 times a year to course correct. If the kind of data you're looking at is weekly, then you've got 52 times a year to take the opportunity to course correct, because you can see something that's going right and you want to do more of it and double down on it, or something's going wrong and you want to pull back from it and say, no, 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 less of that, more of this. So I think it depends on what you're measuring, because some things are, you know, you need that kind of stretch to get a better indicator of what's happening. But think about the opportunity to course correct. So depending on what it is, depends on how often you should measure it.
I would just add to that that you need to move more quickly potentially than you are. I see a lot of recruitment agency owners agonize over things that they know they should do. In a lot of the business consulting that I'm doing, I'm often just holding a mirror up to owners and saying, you already know this. You know what I'm going to say to you. You know what you should have done. Why haven't you done it yet? And they kind of drag their feet on it. So I think it's a really good question, John, that if you're asking that question of, you know, how quickly should I move, you need to move as quickly as it is going to be an impact to your business. Some things are riskier, some are not. You need to have a look at that. Obviously, high risk things, you need to be able to move more quickly, but I encourage you to use the data and your observations together. I often see it's one or the other. We're just using the data and we're not really looking out of our office and having a look on the floor, or we're only walking the floor and going, I got a feeling about this, and we're not watching the data patterns. So I encourage you to make sure you're using both points of information before making a decision, but make the decision quickly, roll it out where you need to, and you know, and don't wait as long as you have been for now, would probably be my advice.
Yeah, and I'd probably add as well, and look, Adele, you're probably hearing this from the clients you work with, is that, you know, some teams, some members in the team may be resistant to change. So we need to sort of drum that into our teams on a weekly basis in our team calls, or whatever the case is, because being open to change, we're changing things always for the better. So we do often, yeah, I often hear that from clients as a bit of a barrier. So if we can get the teams.
Leadership is all about change
Yeah.
management nowadays. Absolutely agree.
Yep, spot on. All right. I think this is the last one we'll have time for today. We've got another one here. How much data should I be sharing with my teams internally?
Yeah, this is a really good one. And I work with all sorts of different recruitment agencies across Australia at all different sizes. And I see the kinds of information people are sharing in different companies. And it's interesting to observe that those recruiters that seem to be more engaged, more connected, and more motivated really are the ones where the business is sharing data. They're sharing information. They're sharing financial results with the team. Now, you have to be a little careful here because too much information can be polarizing as well. So you want to share the quality and the quantity of data that makes sense to your consultants. So make sure they understand what they're getting. Don't just be sending a report out because we've always been sending that report, or having that meeting and putting that slideshow up because that's how you've always done it. Make sure people really understand what the data means, what the table means, and what it means for them, how it impacts their day, and how they need to adjust from that information. So I'm a big advocate of sharing information with your teams. Share as much as you are comfortable to share to help motivate them, to help get them engaged for the good and the bad. I think it's really fair to make sure that people are aware when things aren't going as well. And a lot of agency owners are scared of that. So I don't want to tell them when things aren't going so good because they're all going to get frightened. But I think if you let people know that, in some ways that can be motivating as well. They see that we're having a little lull, in the year. I've got to get my skates on. I've got to move here. And they understand why you're applying pressure. Because there's nothing worse than a manager that's just applying the pressure and they're feeling it and they're saying, what have I done wrong? They'll internalize that. So I think it's really valuable to make sure that you share enough information that, as I said, motivates and excites them and engages them. Let them see it visually. JobAdder has great dashboards you can set up for that. Really easy standard reporting and custom reporting. So I know there's a lot of JobAdder customers on the call. So if you're not living in that reports tab. I tell you, that's my takeaway from today. Get in there, hang up from this webinar and get into the reports tab and have a good exploration in there.
Agreed. I was also thinking that you share the data, and if things aren't going right and it's a tough period, it also, you can point to the data, circle it, and go, okay, but the solution is this. This is the problem. Here's what we're doing about it. This is the solution. So there's some great ways to be able to share that kind of data as a result of that. So keep that in mind, and also show them their efficiency, show the improvement, show what's going well, and it gives you the opportunity to say, these three things, your client visits are out of control, that's fantastic. And oftentimes what happens is a client visit means somebody else benefits from that because you've got a good relationship, you've done a good job, and then they go, oh, now I need something else with another part of the business, and they're coming to you to get that. So remind them what's working well, and it gives an opportunity like to congratulate, and then the stuff that you need to commiserate on, say, all right, but here's the solution. This is what we're going to do about it. That's data in and of itself, by itself, is nothing without some interpretation, some insight. What is the problem? What are we going to do about it? Or what's going great, and let's do more of that. And so those efficiency ratios and those improvements over time is a great way to say, this is what I'm sharing and these are the reasons why. This is what's improving. This is what's getting better. Sometimes, and the aim is to not just do more for the sake of doing more. The aim is to do, work smarter, not harder. Recruiters are working their tails off. They work long hours, and there's no thanks for it. In so many instances, a candidate doesn't take your job and buggers off and takes somebody else's. No thanks for all the hard work, and you're back to refilling the job. So, some good data and a reminder that you're doing all the right things is a beautiful thing. And sometimes that's all somebody needs, is that, you know what, you're doing all the right things, the results will come. Or, you're doing all the right things except for here. Let's go focus on this, and over the course of the next month or that next quarter, we'll do this, and then we'll monitor and see the results that come from it. Now, I mean, years of experience, you've got the trust me factor. Do this, and it's almost like A plus B equals C. It's going to happen. 1 + 1 = 2. There are some certain kind of like laws of recruitment. Certain amounts of activity will reach, certain levels of results. It's just a fact.
And that,
it's just science.
Yeah, and that again touches on what you were saying, Kerry, about replicating the DNA of our top performers. Like, we get that insight, that's great. Now we need to take action. Also, a hot tip for any job adder customers that are on the call, our analytics offering gives you the ability to provide only a login to those who you want to give it to. And then you can obviously share particular reports to different people in the team. All right, that brings us to the end of today's webinar. So sorry we couldn't get to all of your questions. Again, for job adder customers on the webinar today, if you'd like to see how job adder analytics can help your agency drive more revenue, simply tick the box in the post-webinar pop-up window and our team will get in touch. If you're watching this as a recording, you can type in the hyperlink that you see on the screen there, and you can request a demo from our team as well. If you're not a job adder customer and you want to learn more about job adder, you can request a free demo on our website, jobadder.com. Thank you all for joining today, and also a huge, huge thank you to both Kerry and Adele. Really, really appreciate you both jumping on. Thanks everyone again for joining, and have a great week.